the fact, demonstrated once again how, in this case, in Palestine, how law really is in service of power, and which I think seems to be the fear which many of us have when it comes to the Israel-Palestinian issue. I want to swiftly now move on to our final speaker, Bill Law. Bill is the editor of Arab Digest, former BBC's Gulf Affairs analyst. I think you'll be speaking about risks facing journalists in the occupied territories bill. That's what I have with me, and the means to protect them and the means to achieve redressed journalist victims.
Yes, well, thank you for that introduction. I wanted first of all to express my condolences to Shireen Abu Akleh's family and to thank Alina for her courageous and eloquent presentation today. Also, I'm thinking of Shireen's Al Jazeera colleagues and the other journalist who was wounded, Ali Al-Samoudi. I'm thinking too, as I'm sure we all are, of the outrage that the Israeli authorities have inflicted on the Abu Akleh family. And I want to stress again how deeply I feel for them. And I think that, you asked me to speak about journalists and risks of journalists. And I thought, the greatest risk, of course, and it's always been the case, is for journalists in situ, journalists who are there. When I was at the BBC, we worked with many brave people. I was always in the position of being able to leave, and it was highly unlikely that I would face the kinds of threats that daily journalists in situ face. And Lena's referred to it, the number of journalists who have been killed since 2000, it numbers about 50, hundreds more have been wounded. The fact that journalists have been deliberately targeted by the Israelis. It is clear that Shireen was targeted. It's a targeted assassination. The attack on the funeral cortege was appalling and awful, just as the statement by the authorities that they will not investigate because no crime has been committed. I think in the court of public opinion, the Israelis have lost a great deal. They need to lose more. And I want to speak, if I may, about the role of Western journalists in telling and not telling the story over really decades of what is happening in Palestine and to the Palestinian people. I was deeply aggrieved to see how my former employee, the BBC, handled the reporting of Shireen's killing, how they handled the reporting of the attack on the cortege, how they took at face value the claims of the police that stones have been thrown, projectiles have been tossed, and this justified the police action. And I think it's very important, as Gilles has pointed out, the evidence that Lena has given, the evidence of the videos, the attack on the dignity of Shireen as the deceased person, but also on the mourners. This is something that needs to be looked at very, very seriously, and used, I think, by journalists. We have an obligation, and again, Lena threw the gauntlet on the ground and said we have an obligation to tell the truth, not to buy a line, not to cave into pressure. As I said, the greatest risk for journalists in situ is that they will be attacked, they will be, in some cases, murdered, they will be wounded, they will be jailed, they will be beaten, and secondarily, that they will face, of course, censorship. And, I have journalist friends in the Gulf who have been silenced. And they have been silenced because they have paid a heavy, heavy price. They've been jailed, and their families have paid a heavy, heavy, heavy price. So we must not bring any judgment to bear on those journalists in situ who are silent. But what we must bring judgment to bear is on us, the journalists in the West, who are silent or who accept the line that the Israeli spin doctors are putting out. And I think there, coming back to that court of public opinion and coming back to Professor Finkelstein's call to weaponize the evidence, if you will, to use it effectively, to continue to draw attention to what the Israelis are doing day in, day out to Palestinians. And I think back to, 20 years ago, we interviewed a family in Bethlehem. They had a disabled son, an intellectually disabled son, who had been arrested and handcuffed and blindfolded and taken away. When he was released, this boy, who was a happy boy, was completely withdrawn. And then we see just yesterday, something similar has happened. So in 20 years, nothing has changed. We in the West, as journalists, have an obligation, a duty to change it. And I think that, this idea that somehow that human rights can be divorced from what we in the West do with these regimes, be it the Saudis, be it the Israelis, be it the Egyptians, be it the Emiratis, that somehow we can continue to have conversations and share trade and exchanges and academic exercises and not worry about human rights. Well, that's not right, because, as democracies, the fundamental of our democracy is the freedoms we have. And journalists have an obligation to defend those freedoms. And, honestly, we're not doing it. And we're not doing it in regards to Israel. We're not doing it in regards to what's going on in Egypt and elsewhere in the Middle East. We need to speak up. We need to speak up much more effectively. We need to speak up loudly. As a journalist, I'm deeply grieved at the number of journalists who die or are injured. But I'm also deeply grieved at the silence of so many of my colleagues, that they do not speak up, shout out, that we have to defend these freedoms. We have to speak in defense of human rights. And Shireen, she in life did that, and her death is a statement, is a tribute to that struggle. So, we owe it to her. And in terms of pressures, yes, take the evidence, use it, use social media, use the influencers. I mean, it was interesting. Piers Morgan, of all people, there he is. Gary Lineker. Our people are appalled. So we must take that and use it. But I think as a journalist, we in the West have an obligation that we're not fulfilling. We need to look very deeply at ourselves and say, it is absolutely urgent. We do more. We do much, much more. Thank you.